All right, so this week we're going to talk about organizing your papers. But first, we need to talk about the paper construction. So the general essay components probably haven't changed much in the time that you've been writing. There's always an introduction, there's always a body, and there's always a conclusion, and they must go in that order. Seems logical and pretty rational. So now we're going to break those down, and I'm going to give you some ideas of what these can consist of. So, your introduction, think of this as the way to get your audience's attention. You need to do something that is appropriate for your documentation style and for the style of writing that is done in your field. But this can be a question, it can be a quotation, it can be an anecdote, anything that gets your reader's attention and makes them interested and engaged in your topic, something dynamic. This is also a place where lots of people like to do things like definitions, although I personally find those a little overused. So body paragraphs are really the meat of your paper, and this is sort of where things can either go amazingly or they start to fall apart. There are 4 to 5 parts for each body paragraph. And I say 4 to 5 because the topic, sentence, and the claim can be the same thing, but they don't have to be. The topic sentence anchors the paragraph. It tells the reader exactly what the paragraph is going to be about. The claim is the argumentative statement that you're making and you're going to support and analyze within that body paragraph. So your topic sentence may be your claim, but it might not be, depending on how you're constructing your paragraphs. The supporting evidence is the evidence from your source materials, so quotations or paraphrases, data, anecdotes, things, lines from interviews, because you guys will be conducting this interview soon if you haven't already. That's the evidence that you can use to support the claims. So the evidence must be connected to the claim. Then you're going to analyze. You're going to tell us exactly how that evidence supports the claim and how that's connected to your overall thesis statement, because your thesis is like a topic, sentence, and a claim for the entire paper. The thing that gets iffy is this transition area. Some people like to use their topic sentences to transition from one topic to the next. Also, many documentation styles utilize subheadings, which can erase the need for transition sentences, unless you're writing body paragraphs, multiple body paragraphs under the same subheading. So the 4 to 5 parts isn't necessarily a necessity, but there must be some kind of claim, there must be supporting evidence, and there must be analysis, and they have to go in that order because otherwise you're making your reader do a lot of work. And the point is to keep your reader engaged in your subject matter and willing to hear your perspective. And if you're making them do a lot of work and making them guess a lot and try to connect the dots on their own, you may lose them. And then we have the conclusion. I think the famous sort of story about the conclusion is that it's just say what you said. And that's kind of it, but you also can use the conclusion to talk about next steps. So talk about what it is that you want your readers to do with the information that you've just provided them. Is there some sort of action that they can take? Or is there a new question that your perspective has led to that needs some answers? Just tell your reader what it is that they can do with all of the information and the perspective that you have just given them. So we start with the introduction, which for this size of paper, your introduction may not be a single paragraph. It may be 2 or 3 paragraphs because that's how long it takes to provide the context for the discussion that you're having in the first place. So don't be afraid to take more room to describe what it is that you're going to be talking about and then to state your thesis very clearly. Don't be afraid if it takes longer than a paragraph. I also want to talk about body paragraphs. Your analysis portion should be at least 50% of the paragraph. And that keeps your supporting evidence, these source materials right here, from basically from overtaking your voice. We want your voice to be the prominent one. We want it to be heard above everyone else. We don't want your sources to take over because then you lose credibility. So try to keep your supporting evidence present, but you should take more room to analyze the supporting evidence than the supporting evidence takes. The conclusion, much like the introduction, can also take 2 to 3 paragraphs depending on what it is that you've argued. So take the amount of time that you need to succinctly wrap up the argument and provide that information about next steps to your reader. All right, so now we're going to talk about patterns in papers. So if you are doing a descriptive paper where you are describing your issue, problem, situation, those are typically sequential because it emphasizes the order of events. So this means you either go in numerical order, like first, second, third, or chronological order, meaning you're going from event to event. So don't hop around. Make sure that you're going in an organized sort of fashion, and keep that in mind as you're writing. If you're doing something like a compare and contrast essay, and I know that some of you are, keep in mind that these are systematic and deliberate. The first method that you can take is doing all of the similarities, all of the differences, and then talking about the significance of those, or doing all differences, all similarities, and the significance again. The significance has to go last because they need all of that information about the differences and the similarities before you can conclude, basically, before they know what they're supposed to do with all of this and why it means something. It also doesn't help to hop around and do some similarities, some differences, so you kind of have to keep it in a specific kind of order. If you do a cause and effect, you can do where you're describing a cause and an effect. So you're talking about the cause, and then you'll talk about effect 1, effect 2, effect 3, and so on and so forth. If you're focusing on the cause part, you'll first describe the effect, and then you're just going to describe all the aspects of the cause of an issue. So in that case, the majority of your paper's body paragraphs would focus on the cause and not so much on the effect. You'd probably describe the effect in your introduction. Flip that, and then you can actually focus on the effect. So you would describe the cause of things in your introduction to provide that context, and then you will spend your paper talking about the effect of the issue and all of the aspects of the effect. So who's involved, what's going on, what happens if we don't consider this, like what happens if it goes ignored, something like that. And then we have a problem solution paper. This is where a paper discusses the significance of the problem. So it talks about why the problem is such a big deal, and then might talk about the solutions. But typically I would probably tell you to keep these separate. So if you want to do a problem paper, focus on the significance of the problem. Really pull it apart and talk about who's involved, who's not involved, who should be involved, where it's happening, why it's important. Again, what happens if we ignore it? Or you can talk about solutions. I would probably choose one solution and talk about it in detail and why it's not working. So think of this like Common Core. Common Core was a solution to a problem. So what problem was present? You can talk about the problem that led to Common Core, and Common Core being the issue, or you could talk about Common Core as a solution and really talk about sort of the really great parts about Common Core, but then the parts that also aren't working, and be very honest about it. Make sure you acknowledge any weaknesses or gray areas of that solution. In terms of the flow, this is not a pattern. Flow is necessary in all papers. Typically, your argument has to go from strongest point to weakest point, or weakest point to strongest point. It doesn't make any sense, again, to hop around because that gets confusing for the reader. It's completely up to you what direction you go in and what exactly you want to do, but typically papers do flow in one of these two directions. All right, that's all I have for you today. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you can organize an expository research paper. If you have questions, please feel free to use that Q&A forum in your course shell, or you can always email me. All right, thanks guys.